Back to some football, man.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't done a pro football one in a while.
And this is one of those guys that you just don't hear that much about.
You don't hear much about him, but he got the call to Canton earlier this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well-deserved.
Oh, well-deserved. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Today we got a little football action here. I'm your co-host, Dominic DiTolla, sitting alongside co-host Chris Quinn. And today we're going to talk about a Hall of Famer, a recently inducted Hall of Famer.
Well, I mean, this guy, left guard, and
Not a sexy position either.
that's the thing, because I really wouldn't have known about. I actually knew about him just from watching and shit, but like it's one of those positions I just,
Nobody
you don't hear a lot about.
You don't hear a lot about, but if you watched him and kind of watched how his career progressed and what a dominant force he was, you're like, oh yeah, all of the accolades this guy got were well-deserved, and his Hall of Fame induction was very well-deserved. Alan Faneca, probably the top guard of the decade of the 2000s.
Well, that was something that I found so interesting, was he was so dominant literally from like middle school.
Yeah. No, I mean...
He was just like a top athlete, literally. It must have been a weird kind of growing up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because he was let's get into him, man.
Dancing Bear is what he was. I mean, born December 7th, 1976 in New Orleans, grown up in Louisiana, attended John Curtis Christian School in River Ridge there. Was a football and basketball player there in grammar school, which the height thing I kind of understand, but he was just so big.
Well, I guess that was a middle school that prided itself on its sports. So
yeah.
they almost like recruited in middle school, which is kind of awesome.
Pretty much, yeah. He moves with his family to the Houston area for high school. Went to high school at Lamar Consolidated in Texas. Did football and track at that point. And I'm assuming with the track, it was mostly the throwing field events, the discus and shot put and hammer throw, things like that. But he really establishes himself as a dominant football player.
Because this is where he finds his size. And,
yeah.
Oh, man, is he huge.
Yeah, the not only the height, but the weight on this guy and how it was distributed is like what you would want to draw up in a lab. Because eventually during his playing career, he's 6'4", almost 6'5", 320 pounds. But the way it's distributed is not like a lot of 320-pound people that I know.
Well, he's quick off the line. He's not
very quick.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, an ideal guard.
And he's a top recruit coming out of high school as far as football. I mean, by his senior year, he's an All-Greater Houston player, Orlando Sentinel All-South, and Touchdown Club Houston Player of the Year. You give the Player of the Year to an offensive lineman.
Yep.
Do you know how much of a badass you have to be to like get that type of recognition?
They were like, nah, we're going to put the special needs kid in. It's all right, man. He's just going to block the whole way up.
And what's fascinating about his career, though, is it might not have even taken off due to a medical condition.
Oh, okay. So, all right, let's get into this because he discovered this in high school, right?
Yeah, at 15, he discovered he had a medical condition that might have put his just sports career in jeopardy and even his life.
Yeah, he has epilepsy.
He has epilepsy, but luckily he was able to regulate it through drugs.
Yeah, well, I think he started to have seizures when he was 15, 16.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was wrong. They found out he had epilepsy, which can be controlled, the seizures, through medication. And yeah, so he was luckily, obviously Dom was lucky.
Yes.
That they identified what it was and he can continue playing football.
Yeah, and everybody wants him as far as recruiting him. He eventually settles on going back to Louisiana.
Well, I imagine he grew up as an L.S.U fan.
Yeah, that's why. They were not like the program they were in the early 2000s when he goes there in the mid-90s. And in 1994, he goes there, but he redshirts his first season.
Yep.
And I think that's important to bring up is a lot of times, particularly in major college football, when you get guys who are playing along the lines as far as offensive and defensive line, you're going to redshirt them the first year. And the reason you're going to do that is a lot of times these guys are coming into college, not playing against the top competition, but they're also a lot lighter than they should be. So you take that year of eligibility with the red shirt, you still have 4 to go, and you just set them up in the weight room and the training table to put on the necessary weight and gain the necessary strength. And I think it's important because at this time in the SEC, which LSU plays in, it is a ground and pound league, not like it is today. Really, the only team that was throwing the ball with any consistency or any force was University of Florida with the fun and gun. So LSU at this time is a very run-based team. You have guys like Kevin Falk and then later Cecil Collins and shit. So like, the year off helps him, and he's already starting as a redshirt freshman in 95.
Well, I imagine, especially with the competition in high school, you really don't see the same shit you would see on the defensive line. Like, there's no way that you can. So I bet redshirting him is just like it should be like standard is the way I'm
in a lot of
thinking
places
of
it still is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, no, you're going to learn how to weight train. We're going to teach you what to eat and how to eat to get to a specific weight. And you're a freshman, you might not start, so why not learn? And 95, he's SEC Freshman of the Year.
Yep.
So I mean, you already start to see signs in this run-heavy offense of him being the badass he eventually becomes. 96, he's named second-team All-American. And 97, he, as a junior, he's consensus first-team All-American and a finalist for the Outland Trophy. And it said he had somewhere upwards of 200 pancake blocks.
Oh, I saw that.
Which for an offensive guard, man, you got to be just road grading people.
And allowed 1 sack in his final year.
Yeah, and he's playing on kind of mediocre teams, like they're making lesser bowl games, but like, you're picking out the best players on the team. You see him and you're like, this is who we want.
Well, he started 36 games for LSU. I saw that, which
in 3 seasons, that's 12 starts a year.
That's the other thing that you absolutely want from these offensive guys, from these line guys, is like, this guy can go week in and week out.
And he even went back, because, I mean, he's a redshirt junior when he comes out, which makes sense. He even went back to LSU a couple of years later and got his degree in business management and entrepreneurship. Yep. So, I mean, like, good on you, Alan Faneca.
No, I love it.
He enters the 98 draft, and what I wanted to bring up as far as this is concerned is this is the Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf draft. This is kind of the deep draft. This is... In the first round, you have, I believe, 4 Hall of Famers now. You have
Randy Moss,
Charles Woodson, Alan Faneca, Peyton Manning.
Yep.
And the way the board kind of breaks, because he's picked by the Steelers at 26 overall, I believe.
This is what I found so interesting.
So the way NFL teams very rarely do you see offensive guards go early. Mostly because, particularly at this time too, not a lot of value is placed on them. It doesn't matter how good you are. You really start to kind of see them come off the board in the 20s. And, when you have guys like Manning and Moss and, Woodson going off the board, it just is what it is. They play the sexy positions. They play the more valued positions. Luckily for the Steelers, who were sitting there at 26, the year before they had gone to the AFC Championship game, but they had lost John Jackson, their left tackle, in free agency. The interior of their line is getting old. They need a guy. And who falls to them at 26 but the best offensive guard in the entire draft? So they're like, we'll take you. Thank you, everyone else, for being stupid.
It's got to be one of these things where they kept seeing people not pick him up, at 19, 20, 21. Yeah. And they were just like, oh, thank God.
Oh, we didn't have to do anything.
Yes.
And at this particular time, even though the team had made, what was it? I think 6 straight playoff appearances between 92 and 97. The rebuild is kind of there. It kind of came as a shock because everyone was like, oh, Cordell Stewart is the future of the NFL and will lead Dom to drinking boxed wine at a ridiculous rate. But no, they're in need of a rebuild, and this draft is very important for the franchise because not only do you get Faneca in round 1, you get Hines Ward as a compensatory pick in round 3. Hines Ward, who is presenting him at the Hall of Fame this year.
Yep.
And then Deshae Townsend, who was a very savvy and good nickelback and also a number 2 corner for them on 2 of their Super Bowl winning teams and a conference title winning team. So like Tom Donahoe kind of had that cornerstone for like the next decade. He started it off in this particular draft. and Faneca's the centerpiece of it. And 90-80 comes in, they're thinking like, oh, well, Will Wolford and Jim Sweeney are in their mid-30s. Like, they can make do. We can bring them along slow. But no, they both get hurt. And Faneca has to play and plays so well, he's the team's rookie of the year. He's the Joe Green Award winner. 99, he kind of struggles with some injuries, but he's still their starting guard, left guard for them. But 2000 is when you really start to see him shine, is when you really start, because that was the year that Cordell Stewart finally won his job back from like the likes of Mike Tomczak and Kent Graham. This is the dog shit era of quarterbacking for this franchise. So what do you do when you have that? You have
ground and pound.
You have Jerome Bettis coming off 2 1,000-yard seasons the year before in 2000. You have Richard Huntley. Stewart will run the ball a lot because of the way the offense was designed. And Faneca's your centerpiece. And the thing about that is, and what I find is very important, is you're a run right team, meaning your tight end usually lines up on the right side of the offensive line. You're getting in heavy formations, and the guy that kind of controls it all is your left guard, who's pulling a lot. Faneca had amazing feet.
What I heard from Bettis was Faneca was, in his opinion, top 3 guard ever, because almost every single play he was hitting 2 guys. It wasn't one.
The combo blocking.
He was an artist at it, was pretty much what he would say. He was just like, there wasn't one-on-one. It was like that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. Well, he was so great at what, like you were saying, pulling the team.
Yeah, so like not only would he pull, like he'd stick a guy at the line of scrimmage and then pull through the hole, or just based off, or just pull regardless.
Yeah.
On certain plays, he'd help the center with the nose tackle or the defensive tackle and then get to the second level. There was a great interview with Ray Lewis talking like, no, he was a problem. Like, he's like, he not only had the quickest feet I've seen from a guard, but it destroys everything your defense is trying to do when he's getting on smaller linebackers and your secondary and just blowing everything the fuck up. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, to talk about his quickness was because this was a very run-heavy offense, like you were saying, but they were saying like he was just as good on passing plays.
Oh, he was an amazing, and I'll bring this up in 2003 with what ends up happening. He was... he could do everything. You talk about 5-tool players. He was the 5-tool offensive lineman with Swiss Army knife ability.
Yes.
I mean, that's just what he was and who he was. And while they had an improved season. They won 9 of their final 13 games to go 9-7 and just miss the playoffs. But the team ran for over 2,000 yards, and despite a trash quarterback situation, you're like, this is this team's bread and butter. And the following season, when he makes his first of 9 straight Pro Bowls during this era, 2001 was very special for them because they finally have everyone healthy. Mike Mularkey comes in as offensive coordinator. I think he's in his 2nd season. And they really designed the offense to not only run, but have Stewart run a lot and use his legs. And Faneca, again, is the man in the middle, basically. Because in 2001, Bettis was leading the league in rushing before he ended up getting hurt. It was just a magical season. He was first team All-Pro. Stewart had basically a renaissance year in this new offense with not a lot of tape. They went 13-3. And during this season, he's giving guys like Amos Zaraway and Chris Fuamatu Ma'afala 100-yard games towards the end of the season as Bettis is hurt. They win the divisional round game against Baltimore. Everything's set up for them to make the Super Bowl and play the greatest show on turf. Dominant defense, ground and pound would have been the best thing ever. And then fucking New England comes in with their goddamn video cameras. This is documented on Spygate. Those cheating fucks. And they lose the AFC Championship game. I apologize for yelling. But we'll go into 2004 at some point, another game where they brought in their video cameras that Roger Goodell burned. Sorry.
Yeah, it's quite a shit show for this Steelers team because you're right. There's no reason why they shouldn't have played in the Super Bowl in 2002.
Yeah, but I mean, going into the 2002 season, though, basically the cat's out of the bag as far as Stewart. He's figured out, exposed again as just a horrendous passer. And you had brought it up before about his pass blocking. This is when you see him like completely show the other parts of his game, because I think week 4 or 5, they insert Tommy Maddox, former XFL MVP, winner of the $1 million game. He's their quarterback, and they have Hines Ward, who should be in the Hall of Fame, Plexico Burress, who was having a Hall of Fame career until he shot himself in the leg, and they drafted Antoine Randall. So they completely changed from ground and pound to just airing it out that year, and they recover from a 1-3 start to finish 10-5-1 and almost advance to the AFC Championship that game that year in Oakland. They lost a heartbreaker in Tennessee, but Faneca makes first-team All-Pro again at guard. And he's just not only showing off his run-blocking skills, because Zaraway had taken over basically for Bettis that year towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
He's protecting Tommy Maddox's, stone-footed ass in the pocket. I mean, they're slinging it everywhere that year, and he's a big reason why they had their success.
Yeah, because he literally is giving him the time that he needs. And that's what I found so interesting about him was you see their strategy change, and he's just like, no, yeah, I'll do that too.
Yeah, why not?
Faneca was because I felt like that original Steelers, when he was with Bettis in the ground and pound, was such a Steeler team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hard-nosed. And then they flipped it really quick, like you were saying, and he didn't miss a beat.
No, he didn't miss a beat because he could do everything and do everything well. The following season was kind of down. A lot of the reason why they finished 6-10 were there were a lot of injuries, particularly on the offensive line. And one of the things that happened that year is their play at left tackle was so horrible. It was so horrible, and they had nobody to put out there. Faneca played left tackle for a pretty extensive period in 2000. He's protecting the blind side for Tommy Maddox that season as they're slinging it everywhere again. But to insert an that is a hard transition to make. He hadn't played tackle probably since high school, and yet he's playing left tackle at a Pro Bowl level, and he's only named a second-team All-Pro because he couldn't play guard.
Yeah, because he was in his secondary position.
Which is still amazing. And I think Zaraway had a few 100-yard games that season, which is pretty incredible for a scat back, considering your offensive line is just made up like goddamn popsicle sticks that an elementary school kid would make with glue. But 2004, they get kind of back on track. The best part about finishing 6-10 is you finally get a chance to bring in a transcendent player for your offense. And at pick 11, they draft Ben Roethlisberger, who is still somehow playing today.
Yeah, I thought, it's like his 25th season.
Season 18 right now. And the thing is, in week 2, Maddox is the starter. They win week 1 with Maddox. Week 2, they go to Baltimore and get absolutely shellacked. And coming out of that game, in the second half, Gary Baxter, who was a Ravens corner, completely legal hit. I mean, I'm not talking shit about it. He has Maddox land awkwardly, and he fucks up his elbow and collarbone. So you have to put Roethlisberger in. But Bettis is finally healthy. You've acquired power back Deuce Staley in the offseason. What do you go back to do? You go back to pounding the rock. A lot of play action for Big Ben to keep him upright. And who's at the center of all of it? Alan Faneca.
Well, I found it interesting because I feel like at that moment they could really utilize what Faneca can do the best, which was you can ground and pound, but then if you need to pass it, if you need to sling it out, he can do that too. And this is when obviously the Steelers really come together.
Yeah, and the offensive line is finally healthy because at this point they had invested very heavily in it and it paid off. 2002, they got Kendall Simmons, their right guard, in the first round. In the year 2000, Jeff Hardings, who we talked about on the 96 draft episode, he signed as a free agent. He was a Pro Bowl player for them. You have Marvell Smith, playing one of the tackle spots. And in 2004, they also drafted Max Starks, who started on both their Super Bowl winning teams. So, I mean, they really had everything kind of come together in the right way for them. I believe Simmons was hurt in 2004, so they had, I think, Keeter Vincent playing some right guard for them. But the line is congealed, and you have a Super Bowl contender. And after that Baltimore game, they just don't lose. They don't lose. They reel off 15 straight wins, including the divisional game, and then they go into the AFC Championship, like I described before. They play the goddamn Patriots. Ben shits the bed in this game. I don't know if cameras would have helped, but I'm sure calling out certain signals and relaying them via videotape and such maybe played a role, but they end up getting absolutely clobbered by the Patriots. But they're on the doorstep. They're almost there. And he's like, at this point, a team leader. They're really rallying around everybody. They're like, okay, man, we got to take our shot. We got to really take our shot in the next few seasons because this could eventually be it if we don't draft well.
Well, they have the right mixture of veterans, youth players, and these guys who are really in their prime. And that's what you see from this Steelers team is... I mean, I still can't believe Ben's still playing, but
yeah, I know, right?
Like, just
he's the only one left.
That's what I mean. Thinking about it, right? I was just thinking about that, but like they really come together, and they're the team to beat for 2 or 3 years. So,
and the following season, the same thing happened. I should have mentioned 2004. He's first team All Pro again because he doesn't have to play left tackle.
Exactly.
2005, they really start humming. I mean, I think they started 7-2. I want to say so. They're like. Looking like, okay, Indianapolis, I think, started that year like 13-0. But outside of Indianapolis, if you're thinking, oh, is there a team to challenge Peyton Manning's choke artist ass? It's Pittsburgh. They could be one of the teams. But they hit this 3-game midseason losing streak where everything kind of falls apart, and they're down to 7-5, and they're like the 7 or 8 seed in the AFC. And Faneca has talked about it, how much fun it was during those final 4 weeks to reel off 4 in a row. And there was an iconic game during that stretch. They played the Bears, who won their division that year in Pittsburgh, and it started snowing. And by this point, Willie Parker, who 1,000-yard rusher for Faneca, should have led the league in rushing in 2007 if it wasn't for an injury. He's your main back, but in the snow, playing the Bears with Urlacher and everything. They put Bettis in the second half, and if you watch Faneca in this game, oh my God, there's the iconic play of Bettis running Urlacher over at the goal line when 21-9. I mean, they kind of got back to that. They kind of got back to being like, okay, we're protecting our young quarterback through the running game. It pays off. They go in, but then the playoffs start. They go to Cincinnati, the Carson Palmer game. But that's when they start letting Ben air it out more because it's like almost a change in strategy. They're like, let's take the handcuffs off the kid. And he plays at a Joe Montana level for the next 3 weeks.
Yep.
Like they beat Cincinnati 31, I think, to 17. The following week, they have the huge upset against the Colts, where at the beginning of the game, I'll never forget watching this in Hawaii. I had to wake up, I think, at like 7 or 8
to watch it.
Yeah, and I was hungover as shit. I was thinking, oh, there's no goddamn way. Indy had spanked them in the regular season, and instead of running the ball at the beginning, they let Ben build a 14-0 lead just by throwing it, just launching it to Ward, launching it to Heath Miller, what's his name, Randall L. Hey everybody, just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
I love this from a team because it really comes to game strategy is when they're really running the ball through the whole season. They get into the playoffs and they're like, no, we're going to start passing it now. As a defense, you're like, all right, they're going to run it this play.
Yeah.
All right, no, they're going to run it this play. All right, shit, I swear to God, they're going to run it this play. And you're right, because I watched this, or at least the highlights from this game, and Ben just like, in that first quarter, he's just like, all right, here we go.
All play action.
Here we go. All play action, too, which is my favorite.
I mean, and what was great about that game was that they built this, at halftime, it was 14-3.
Mm-hmm.
what they did when they built that lead, because their defense was super badass at that point, they were like, oh, let's put Bettis in for a little bit and see what happens.
And control the clock.
And that's exactly what they did. They extended possessions. Faneca, again, a huge part of this. They go up 21-3. Then some questionable officiating. Almost that near-miss fumble, which I about had a heart attack on. But they end up winning the game. And then the next week, which was, oh my God, even better, they go to Denver and just spank the shit out of the Broncos. There's one Bettis touchdown in the first half. I think it put them up, 17-3. It's your typical jumbo package. Bettis gets the ball, and all you see in front of him is a 66 pulling and just lighting some guy up as Bettis
just
falls
a hole.
just falls into the end zone. But yeah, it was, oh man, and they go to the Super Bowl. And this is against Seattle. This is the game where he probably has his most iconic block of all.
Super Bowl 40.
Ben really struggled in this game. They really needed the run game and some timely defensive plays to really help them. But they somehow find themselves up 7-3 at halftime, and coming into the second half, they're backed up on their own 25, and they're run. I think they're in 11 personnel with one tight end, one back, and I think 3 wide receivers.
Okay.
And they check to a run off of this formation, thinking the defense is going to over pursue, which they do. They run Parker to the right, and they have Faneca pulling in front of him. You can see this. It's probably, like I said, it's his most iconic block. Faneca runs up, just absolutely digs this linebacker out of the hole between Starks and Simmons. Parker isn't he's not even touched on this play. I mean, he had world-class speed. He just goes 75 off a right guard, and Faneca was the one that blew it wide open. And they end up winning the game 21-10. Super Bowl champion, first team All-Pro. I mean, what more could you want out of a career like that?
Well,
and there's more.
Yeah, and there's more. I find it interesting when people are like, God, why don't they just ground and pound right now? Or why don't they just air it out? And it normally has nothing to do with the running back or quarterback. It's normally like, oh, no, they don't have the line to do that.
The game is won in the trenches, regardless of how, no matter the era, it's what can you do along the line of scrimmage? And
because that creates everything.
Yeah, that's where everything builds off of on every single play. Football is more or less an ultimate team sport because of that, because you have 5, sometimes 6 guys working together. But 2006, the team kind of struggles. Roethlisberger comes off his motorcycle accident, which isn't the first off-season escapade that will kind of hurt this team. Won't go into that since it's not that episode. Lots of turnovers and everything. But this was Willie Parker's breakout season. I mean, he had 1,000 yards the year before, but he had two separate 200-yard games this year. I mean, they really are trying to protect Ben. Charlie Batch played a pretty significant amount that year as his backup. But
as long as you're a competent running back, I feel like you're going to get 1,000 yards. And that's what Faneca can give you.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just another obviously good running back, but he's giving these guys these opportunities.
Well, it was awesome because I got to go to the Pro Bowl that year, and I got to see Faneca, Parker, and Polamalu play.
Oh, that's awesome!
That game. Yeah, that was a fun experience. But they, because of all these issues, they finish 8-8.
Yeah,
and just missed the playoffs. But 2007 is when things start to get a little sour between him and the Steelers, and leads to his departure. Nobody's necessarily at fault. One of the things was his contract is expiring at the end of 2007. Pittsburgh, because of the salary cap, has other people to pay.
Yes.
And they have a good young team. I mean, Roethlisberger's still on his rookie contract. You need to bring him back. I mean, after experiencing everything between Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger, you find any competency, you hold on to that like grim death. Troy Polamalu needs a new contract. Ike Taylor needs a new contract. And all these guys are significantly younger than Alan Faneca. So the team, and they're not a big money spending team, and he's set to become the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL because, Well, shit, you just made 6 straight Pro Bowls. But after 2006, I wanted to go into it. Bill Cowher retires, their head coach.
Okay.
And a lot of the thinking is, okay, well, if Cowher's leaving, you have offensive coordinator Ken Wisenhunt on staff, who later ends up coaching the Arizona Cardinals. He had done some offseason interviews after the Super Bowl. I think he interviewed with the Raiders. But you also have, wanting the job, offensive line coach Russ Grimm, who's a Hall of Fame offensive lineman. Both of them want the job. It seems like a seamless transition. And Faneca's obviously rooting for his boy Russ Grimm because that's his position coach since I think not since he entered the NFL, but I think Grimm joined in like 2000 or 2001. So
that's definitely
a close
who
relationship.
He wants to take over this team. And in his mind, it will keep this team going in the same direction.
Exactly. So you're thinking like, okay, well, maybe if they hire one of these guys, he'll re-up for maybe a less than market value deal for him. It doesn't happen. Mike Tomlin is hired instead, and he's still coaching the team fucking 15
him and Ben.
years later. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But Faneca isn't too pleased with this.
And with having other guys getting their contracts renewed over him, which it's like you said, it's not the fault of the organization. Those were probably the correct moves.
They're the correct, sensible moves in a salary cap sense.
Yes.
Because at this juncture, I think he's, 32? You know, he's been beat up most of his... I mean, he's not injured. He's playing 16 games a year. I mean, he's still kicking ass. But, like, it's the perfect storm of him being like, well, fuck it, I'm going to play 2007 and kick ass, but I'm playing for a contract somewhere else.
Yes.
And before the season, 2007, the Steelers had voted on their 75th anniversary team.
I thought that.
Guess who was
awesome.
Guess who was one of the starting guards?
Yeah,
Alan Faneca.
Which I mean makes sense because I don't think they've ever had anybody else at that position that was so dominant.
No, I mean even on those 70s teams,
Yeah.
and even when they were good in the early to mid 90s, the only guy in his category is another Hall of Famer, and that's Dermontti Dawson, and then Mike Webster, obviously. But both of those guys are centers. They never had a guard like him.
That's what I mean. To have a guard that's your superstar on the line is pretty rare, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. But he goes out and plays 2000. Like, he doesn't make a fuss. He's just like, I'm leaving.
And Ben has a really good passing season in 2007, right?
That was the first year that they really opened the offense up.
Okay.
Bruce Arians, Super Bowl winning coach now, was their offensive coordinator. Him and Ben had a really good relationship, largely based on him being like, oh, you want to throw it 40 times a game? Fuck yeah, you can. And, you know, they have Hines Ward, Santonio Holmes. I mean, they have a Heath Miller. They have a great roster. Willie Parker was leading the NFL in rushing, I think, until like week 16 before he went down with, I think he broke his fibula against the Rams. But I mean, like, Faneca's up to his old ways. Another first-team All-Pro season, kicking ass. They go 10-6. They win the division again after a down year. But they end up losing a heartbreaking, and it's absolutely heartbreaking in that sense. I don't know why they always lose to fucking Jacksonville in the playoffs, but my God, they came all the way back from like 20 down to take the lead, and Jacksonville won on like a chip shot field goal at the end. But that was the end of Faneca. It sucks that it had to end that way for him after 10 years in one spot, making 7 straight Pro Bowls, and then he hits the open market, as he said he would.
And this is the other thing is you can't blame a player for going out and getting the money they deserve.
Hell no.
That's the thing that you're just like, yeah, take the biggest offer. Take the most guaranteed money, too. That's my other thing.
I remember at the time I was thinking like, well, it's sensible for the Steelers to let him go, even though I don't want them to, but also going like, no, motherfucker, you go get paid.
That money.
Like, I can see why you're pissed about how the head coaching situation shook out. Like, go ahead. Like, you've earned it.
Yeah. So he signs with the Jets for, I think it was
March
like
1st, yeah.
$25 million, right?
$25 million guaranteed, 5 years, $40 million, which made him the highest paid offensive lineman until the draft, where Jake Long was taken first, and this is pre-draft slotting for salaries, so he made just a ridiculous amount for the Dolphins. But it's funny because he actually has a pretty successful career with the Jets.
But the Jets aren't really a good team.
No, because 2008, they start off great. They have a great offensive line in place because you have DeBrickashaw Ferguson, perennial Pro Bowler at left tackle, Nick Mangold, perennial Pro Bowler at center, Damian Woody, who was on those good Patriots teams at one of the guard spots, and then you add Faneca to the mix, and you have an aging Favre where you're riding the running game.
Oh, yeah, they picked up Favre.
Yeah, that was the Favre year.
Interesting.
They rushed for over 2,000 yards, and even though they faltered down the stretch to go 9-7, you're like, that's not a bad pickup. You're getting your money's worth.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
And then in 2009, and what ends up happening was they draft a quarterback. They draft a rookie quarterback, Butt Fumble Sanchez. And this is pre-Butt Fumble, where everyone was like all excited.
Yep, and thought he was going to be
the next Broadway Joe.
Yep.
So in 2009, you're rolling in with this great freaking offensive line. You've got veteran Thomas Jones, Sean Green, pounding the rock. You're much like Ben's early career. You're just like, let's ground and pound the shit out of people. And that's exactly what that team did. They had, they beat the Patriots that year in one of the games. And then by the end of the season, they finally snagged the last wild card spot. So they're in the playoffs. And in the next two games, particularly the second one, but they go into Cincinnati and beat the Bengals in the wild card round, which sets them up to play San Diego.
Okay.
And they were the 5 seed that year. San Diego was a 2 seed. And what ends up happening in that game, besides Nate Keating absolutely shitting the bed, this is the game I always point to is why the Chargers left San Diego. Because if they win that game, they beat the Colts, and then they beat the Saints in the Super Bowl. That could have saved the franchise. Nate Keating missed like 3 field goals.
Yeah.
And the Jets played it really close to the vest. Ground and pound with Sean Green and Thomas Jones and kick the shit out of the Chargers. And they make the AFC Championship game in 2009. Granted, they lose to the Colts as they're overmatched, but like, that's still amazing.
Yeah, it was still a great team, and still Faneca's like so important to these offensive lines that he makes another Pro Bowl.
Well, it's 2 years in New York. He made the Pro Bowl 2 times. I mean, you get what you pay for. I mean, he made 9 in a row from 2001 to 2009.
That's what they did. They definitely put that price tag on him like, oh, you're the highest paid for the next 2 weeks, but you're as high as we're going to give you. Bring a couple of Pro Bowl appearances because that's what any team wants.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is when you see, and I feel like for any offensive line playing a decade in the NFL, you're just like, all right, this is when it's got to.
Well, at the end of the season, he's already played 12 years.
Yeah.
And at 34, with that much cap on the books, the Jets just cut him. They draft a huge draft bust in the second round of the 2010 draft in Vladimir Dukas. They get rid of him, but he plays one more season.
Yep, with Arizona.
And he goes where every old person goes when it's time to...
One last year in the sun.
One last year in the sun, Jake Taylor. He goes and reunites with both Ken Wisenhunt and Russ Grimm in Arizona.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Which I bet led to that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and he signed a 1-year deal worth $2.5 million, and the Cardinals that year not very good, but still another season in the NFL, another payday, good for him. And on the 10th of May, 2011, he calls it a career.
Yeah,
after 13 seasons, 13 amazing seasons,
9 Pro Bowls.
Yeah, 8 first-team All-Pros. I think no 6. What was it? 6 first-team All-Pros, 2 second-team All-Pros. That's pretty good. It's not like he's making the Pro Bowl like a Mitch Trubisky or an Andy Dalton because everyone drops out. It's like, no, he's the guy.
He's the guy. For almost a decade. That's the thing I loved about it was like there wasn't a drop-off.
Well, like outside of 99, he was just, and we talked about this in the previous episode, dude's a horse.
Yeah.
206 games, 201 starts. I mean, it's not like this guy's just on the team. He's your best player in the trenches on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But an interesting thing I wanted to get into
post-career
is while he played at 6'4", 6'5", 320, he decides to not carry the weight anymore now that he doesn't have to. He lost over 100 pounds after his playing career, which kudos to him because there's a lot of guys who struggle with weight issues.
Yes.
As we talked about in that Chargers episode. And in February of 2014, he ran the New Orleans Marathon. And he did it in under 4 hours.
Well, I find this interesting statement that you hear about pro athletes where they kind of don't necessarily like the sport they play, or they just have the build for it. And I think of it with linemen, not that he didn't like football or any kind of crazy shit like that, but I think of it with linemen when they drop all that weight and they're just like, I can finally not eat 5 meals of pure like protein a day and then work. You know what I mean? Like
I can live my life again.
Exactly. Yeah. Because that's the thing that I see with these guys who go from like 320 to 350 is like, that's a whole nother, the weight training on that is a whole nother thing.
Bro, I lost 85 pounds in the last year. That's not easy to get over 100. And you see him now and you're like, oh, his face is totally recognizable, but I would never know that that's him because of his svelte frame.
Yeah, I feel bad that you lost your son, but that's all right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, you literally lost like a little kid on you. Like,
I lost a third grader.
That's why it's so amazing, and the marathon and how healthy he is now. That's why I love it.
And the coolest thing is he looks back on his Steelers career just fondly.
That's what I mean. He loved football and was one of these guys who was there
a perfect fit.
He was there every single day, just killing it.
And like they had asked him, he had plenty of players come up and ask him like, "Oh, how do you guys do it every year?" And he's like, "You know what? It's just the character of these guys. They bring it in. You have Jerome Bettis's and Hines Ward's and stuff like." These are the types of guys who will take your team from 6 or 7 wins to 10 wins just based off of their character.
And take you from playoff teams to Super Bowl winning teams.
Which he was. I mean, he had one of the best careers of an interior lineman that's ever played the game. And on the 6th of February of this year, 2021, elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he's going to have his buddy Hines Ward inducting him, which is... I will definitely be watching that because that's a huge chunk of my childhood right there. So
well deserved, and I love when a guy who isn't in it, like we were saying, in a fancy, pretty position, gets what he deserves. That's the shit I love. So yeah, unbelievable career and absolutely well deserved.
And we talk about all positions in sports on the Sports Experience podcast, not just quarterback, running back, receiver. No, we go into it.
Not just doggy style. We go into the Kama Sutra here at the... Thank you all very much. Hey, everybody. This is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.